Hello everyone, welcome to the 10th lecture of this massive open online course on philosophical foundations of social research. This is the last lecture of the 4th week. We are discussing the second part of Max Weber. In the first part, we have discussed how Weber's theoretical positions and methodological writings are usually characterized as effectively a reconciliation between positivist and neo-Kantian positions. Then we have discussed methodology of the social sciences, Weberian methodology of the social sciences. And in the second part, we have discussed methodological individualism, typology of social action, how value rational social action and goal rational social action, alternatively known as instrumental rationality, they constitute meaningful social action. Already done, we have discussed Weberian value relevance, interpretative understanding of social action, how cultural sciences according to Weber differ from the natural sciences in the distinctive role of valuations in the formation of the concepts and in the distinctive type of knowledge involved in them. We have also discussed within methodology of the social sciences, ethical neutrality in sociology and economics, objectivity in social science and social policy, and how critical studies in the logic of cultural sciences was delineated in the context of objective possibility and adequate causation in historical explanation in Weberian methodology of the social sciences. We have also discussed how Weber tried to encapsulate sociology. Sociology is a science which attempts the interpretative understanding of social action in order thereby to arrive at a causal explanation of its course and effects. We have discussed social action, understanding and explanation of social action. Explanation, if you look at, we have discussed explanation in the context of positivism and understanding in the context of Verstehen method or neo-Kantian positions, and how Weber tried to make a distinction between individual social action and supra-individual entities. We have discussed typology of social action. We have discussed methodological individualism. How methodological individualism refers to theoretical positions that adequate sociological accounts must necessarily involve reference to individuals, persons, their interpretations of their circumstances and the reasons and motives for the actions that they take. We have also discussed how interpretative understanding of social action is very important to grasp or understand or interpret actors' meanings. Whatever action that we undertake, it must have a goal, it must have a purpose, it must have an aim, it must have an objective, it must have an intention. That is an intentional human action. For Weber, Verstehen is not a method but an objective or goal or achievement, understanding of social action. And interpretation, according to Weber, has two parts or consists of two parts. One, interpretation at the level of textual and linguistic meaning of a cultural product, and value interpretation. It may be social value, it may be cognitive value, it may be aesthetic value, it may be religious value, and so on. And in today's lecture, we are going to focus on what are the methodological implications of Weberian framework for social science research today in 2021, in the 21st century. To start with, as I said, interpretation consists of two things. One, interpretation at the textual or linguistic meaning of a cultural product, and value interpretation that does not involve evaluation of action or product, but involves selective conceptualization of the object in relation to some value. It may be social value, it may be cognitive value, it may be aesthetic value, it may be religious value, and so on. But That selective conceptualization, when I say value interpretation, this portion, value interpretation involves selective conceptualization. Selective conceptualization of what? Now, selective conceptualization of the object or the product in question in relation to some value. That is why I gave you the example of, suppose tea in Assam is a cultural product. Okay? It has social value, it has religious value, it has cognitive value, it has aesthetic value. Suppose handloom products, they are very unique to some regions. You will find different handloom products in South India, you will find different handloom products in Northeast India, you will find different handloom products in eastern part of India, you will find different handloom products in western part of India, you will find different handloom products in northern part of India. Handlooms, handicrafts, they are culturally embedded in a particular region. Okay? That is why selective conceptualization of the object or product in question, that but when I say selective conceptualization of the object or product in question in relation to some value, value as we understand, it is not limited to only economic value. Okay? It may have economic value, I am not denying that, but it must have some social value, cognitive value, aesthetic value, religious value, cultural value and so on. Okay? In this sense, we are using selective conceptualization. Now, according to Weber, what is the basis of selection? On what basis we tend to select? According to Weber, selection is based on cultural relevance. How? If I ask you, what is the topic that you are more interested in? I am sure you will try to point out certain topics which are very much culturally, socially, economically, politically relevant to your own position, to maybe your own village, maybe your own state, maybe your own region, maybe your own country, or maybe your own continent. In general, you look at Durkheim, you look at Weber, they all tried to look at, they tried to select certain topics on the basis of their cultural relevance. If I ask you, if somebody is interested in working on farmer suicides in India, we generally do not say that no, I want to study farmer suicides in the United States of America. Okay? An American may look at this. At best what we do, we try to look at comparative framework. What is the condition of farmers in India on the one hand, and what is the condition of farmers in the United States of America or United Kingdom or France or Germany or People's Republic of China or Japan or Singapore or Hong Kong or Taiwan. We may have that comparative framework, but independently we do not want to do that because of this dimension of cultural relevance. Okay? That is why according to Weber, selection is based on cultural relevance. And what is that value then? How do we attach value to the process of selection? No, according to Weber, value for a sociologist in particular and social scientist in general is always an object of study. Please do not think that no, this is a value, this is a higher order norm, that is why this cannot be questioned. No, values also must be questioned. what was value 200 years ago is no longer a value. Let me give you an example. In Indian sociocultural milieu, I mean 200 years ago, sati was considered a value. But now sati is considered illegal, unethical, it's a crime. That's why values undergo change with the change in our intellectual and political consciousness, with the change in the modes of production, with the change in our rational thinking. Okay. That's why for Weber, okay, or according to Weber, what a social scientist, what a sociologist must look at so far as value is concerned. How does one examine value? Value for a sociologist, for a social scientist is always an object of study. Okay? That is why they must be interrogated, they must be questioned and so on. Weber divides interpretative or interpretive understanding into two parts. Okay. One is direct understanding and the other indirect understanding. Direct understanding is alternatively known as observational understanding, and indirect understanding is alternatively known as explanatory understanding. That is why interpretive understanding according to Weber has two parts, one direct understanding and the other indirect understanding. And direct understanding is alternatively known as observational understanding of social action, and indirect understanding is known as alternatively known as explanatory understanding of social action. Now, both are important. What I observe, whether it is true or false, I must provide an explanation to validate whether what I have observed is correct or not. I might have observed something which is absolutely wrong. I might have observed that, suppose if there was a time when people said that Indians and dogs are not allowed, okay, what kind of explanation that the colonizers, the British government, that they provided? What is the explanation? That explanation was racist in nature. If I say one particular community is superior to other community, then I become racist in nature. If I say a particular religion is superior to other religions, a particular region is superior to other regions, I think a particular culture is superior to other cultures, then this is racist in nature. In this case, I must provide some explanation to validate my claim, to validate my observation, and both forms of interpretive understanding are required. Okay? That is why such understanding is based on interpretative understanding of social action that involves a method or a strategy. Now, what is that method or strategy? This method or strategy is nothing but imaginative identification okay, that imaginative identification is nothing but it is primarily to be spontaneous and immediate recognition of the acts and their meanings. And their meanings in everyday life. Okay. Then what is imaginative identification? Imaginative identification is primarily to be spontaneous and immediate recognition of the acts and their meanings in everyday life. Okay. And this imaginative identification is processed through rule governed sad culture. Then as I said, interpretive understanding involves a method or a strategy, that is imaginative identification, primarily to be spontaneous and immediate recognition of the acts and the kind of meanings which are associated with those acts in everyday life. This imaginative identification is processed through rule governed strategy within a sad culture, and it is possible. I mean, so what is that then what is this rule governed sad culture? This rule governed sad culture is based on this rule governed sad culture is based on relevance, acceptability, and elegance. When I said this imaginative identification is processed through a rule governed strategy within a sad culture, and then such rule governed sad culture, rule governed strategy within a sad culture is based on relevance, acceptability and elegance, what does it imply? No, it must be culturally relevant. If I mean a particular interpretation must be acceptable to the wider audience, and it must be elegant, it must be unique in style, unique in fashion, unique in appearance, unique in aesthetics. It must be relevant, it must be acceptable, and it must be elegant. In this sense, we are using rule governed strategy within a sad culture or rule governed sad culture. But is it possible to make both, I mean all three combined? Is it possible, such kind of combination, that such interpretation must be relevant, must be acceptable and must be elegant? Is it always possible? This is methodologically very important, that it is possible for whoever only when both observer and observed, both subject and objects of study, both researcher as well as the researched, okay, when they share culture. But most often we will find that observer and the observed, they do not share culture. Then what will happen? Suppose if I go to a field where the culture, the practices, the material world of my respondents, of the researched, not the researcher, but the researched, the observed, not the observer, but only the observed. If I do not understand their cultural practices. As a researcher, if I do not understand, then in that case, if observer and observed, if they share culture, then that is fine. If they understand each other's culture, that is fine. But if the observer or if the researcher does not understand the culture of the observed, if observer and observed they do not share culture, then what will happen? Okay. One possibility is that observer may give a different meaning, then that is a problem, right. If I say the observer may give a different meaning, I mean then he or she is not able to capture the facts, he or she is not able to capture the reality. If you go to a village, if you study a tribe, then you perhaps if you do not understand the culture of that, then perhaps you will give a different meaning. That is why sociologists, social anthropologists and so on, social scientists, we all place much emphasis on participant observation, ethnographic research and so on, so that you should try to understand the culture, the practices of your respondents. You go and speak to scientists, okay, top-notch ethnographic research can be carried out, like Bruno Latour's laboratory life. But if you do not understand their practices, then how can you capture that? You want to speak to plant breeders, you want to speak to molecular biologists, you want to speak to physicists, but you should understand their world first, what they are doing, how they are doing. Prior knowledge of their work will help you understand their work. Okay? That is why we always place much emphasis on literature review. You first, I mean, you should be ready with literature first to see, to have some kind of prior knowledge about the cultural practices, about the scientific practices of your respondents. Okay? But if you do not share culture, if you do not understand their practices, then you tend to give a different meaning altogether. That is one possibility. The second possibility is that either the observer or the observed should get socialized into the culture that the observer wants to study. These are two possibilities. I mean, either the observer must get socialized into the culture of the observed, or the observed must also understand the limits of the cultural traits of the observer, okay, in this sense. Then if I say cultural practices and so on, then what is culture for Weber? What is culture? Culture, Weber defines culture as the totality of real objects to which we attach generally acknowledged values or complexes of meaning constituted by values. This is important. Then what is culture? Weber defines culture as the totality of real objects to which we attach generally acknowledged values or complexes of meaning constituted by values. What does it mean? It implies that culture consists of all those items, things, products and so on produced by human beings, human action then, it must be intentional human action or purposive social action or goal oriented social action for the sake of value ends. Then culture consists of all those items produced by human beings for the sake of value ends. Then Weber defines culture as the totality of real objects to which we attach generally acknowledged values or complexes of meaning constituted by values. In other words, culture consists of all those items produced by human beings for the sake of value ends. Then we come to our one important from value ends, what we come to know that how culture plays an important role in such interpretation, in such imaginative identification, in selection, in understanding value ends. Okay. If I say understanding value ends, okay, then Verstehen, that understanding is important. In German it is called Verstehen, in English it is understanding. Okay. Now, such imaginative identification that we have discussed, that it is processed through a rule governed strategy within a shared culture, imaginative identification primarily to be spontaneous and immediate recognition of the acts and their meanings in everyday life. According to Weber, such imaginative identification is useful, but not an essential condition for meaningful action. Imaginative identification, according to Weber, is useful. Why? No, precisely because it is primarily spontaneous and immediate recognition of the acts and their meanings in everyday life. Imaginative identification is processed through a rule governed strategy within a shared culture. I mean, such rule governed strategy within a shared culture is based on relevance, acceptability and elegance. According to Weber, imaginative identification is a useful tool for sociologists, for social scientists and so on, but it is not an essential condition for meaningful social action. And secondly, this one, okay, that there must be a recognition of the rational connection between means and ends. There must be a rational connection between means and ends. Verstehen is extremely important in Weberian framework, that imaginative identification is useful but not an essential condition for meaningful social action. and there must be recognition of the rational connection between means and ends. As we have discussed, sociology as such for Max Weber is a science which attempts the interpretive understanding of social action in order thereby to arrive at a causal explanation of its course and effects. It is very much made clear in his methodology how Weber, how he distinguished himself from Durkheim and Marx and other classical figures, in that his primary focus was on individuals and culture. Okay. This meaningful social action is, I mean, this meaningful social action also centers around individuals. Okay. Then as I said, Weber's primary focus was on individuals and culture, and unlike theorists such as Auguste Comte and Emile Durkheim, Weber did not consciously attempt to create any specific set of rules governing sociology or the social sciences in general. Whereas Durkheim focused on society, Weber concentrated on the individual and their actions, that is structure and action. Compared to Marx, that we are going to cover in the 5th week in terms of 3 lectures, okay, who argued for the primacy of the material world over the world of ideas, Weber valued ideas as motivating actions of individuals, at least in the big picture. Max Weber would primarily be concerned with the question of objectivity and subjectivity. Objectivity and subjectivity, going on to distinguish social action from social behavior. As I said, coughing is a part of social behavior, okay? But if I tend to apologize after that, then it is a part of social action. Okay? It must be noted that social action must be understood through how individuals subjectively relate to one another, and study of social action through interpretive means or Verstehen or understanding must be based on understanding the subjective meaning and purpose that individuals attach to their actions. Social actions may have easily identifiable and objective means, but much more subjective ends, and the understanding of those ends by a scientist is subject to yet another layer of subjective understanding, that again of the scientist. Weber noted that the importance of subjectivity in social sciences makes creation of foolproof universal laws much more difficult than in natural sciences, and the amount of objective knowledge that social sciences may achieve is precariously limited. Overall, Weber supported the goal of objective science as one definitely worth striving for, though he noted that it is ultimately an unreachable goal. This objectivity cannot be reached, according to Weber. Absolute objectivity, absolute neutrality is always a myth. Okay? What he wrote in Objectivity in Social Science, in sociological writings in 1904, that there is no absolutely objective scientific analysis of culture. All knowledge of cultural reality is always knowledge from particular points of view, particular perspectives, particular vantage points, and an objective analysis of cultural events which proceeds according to the thesis that the ideal of science is the reduction of empirical reality to laws is meaningless, because the knowledge of social laws is not knowledge of social reality, but is rather one of the various aids used by our minds for attaining this end. the principle of methodological individualism that we have already discussed, which holds that social scientists should seek to understand collectivities, maybe nations, cultures, governments, churches, religious institutions, corporations and so on, solely as the result and the context of the actions of individual persons. It may be traced to Weber, particularly to the first chapter of Economy and Society, in which Weber argues that only individuals can be treated as agents in a course of subjectively understandable action. In other words, Weber contended that social phenomena can be understood scientifically only to the extent that they are captured by models of the behavior of purposeful individuals, models that Weber called ideal types. These ideal types, I mean Weber called these models ideal types, from which actual historical events necessarily deviate due to accidental and irrational factors. And the analytical constructs of an ideal type never exist in reality according to Weber, but provide objective benchmarks against which real life constructs can be measured. Now, what Weber wrote in Economy and Society, that we know of no scientifically ascertainable ideals. To be sure, that makes our efforts more arduous than in the past, since we are expected to create our ideals from within our breast in the very age of subjectivist culture. And if you look at Weber's methodology that was developed in the context of a wider debate about methodology of social sciences, the method dispute, okay, which one is more important, or which one is correct, or which one is more legitimate, which one is more valid, between understanding and explanation, between positivist and neo-Kantian positions, between explanation and Verstehen method. Weber's position was close to historicism, historical method. As Weber understood social actions as being heavily tied to particular historical contexts, and its analysis required the understanding of subjective motivations of individuals. I mean, these individuals are social actors. Thus, Weber's methodology emphasizes the use of comparative historical analysis. As such, Weber was more interested in explaining how a certain outcome was the result of various historical processes rather than predicting an outcome of those processes in the future. This is very important, okay, that comparative historical framework. Then within that comparative historical framework, how are you going to explain? If I say, what is the economic condition of the larger section of the population in India on the one hand, and Scandinavian countries on the other, I mean Sweden, Norway, Denmark and so on. Okay? That comparative framework I am trying to build, and historically I have to situate. Okay? In that case, I must try to provide some kind of explanation. For Max Weber, indirect or explanatory understanding of social action involves two things. One, explanation must be adequate at the level of meanings. And secondly, explanation must be adequate at the level of statistical generalizations. Then in this context, what if I say that explanation must be adequate at the level of meaning? Weber was taking a neo-Kantian position. This is a neo-Kantian position, and this is a positivist position, statistical generalizations. Okay? That is why for Weber interpretative, that within interpretative understanding of social action, I mean that indirect or explanatory understanding of social action must involve two things, that one, that explanation must be adequate at the level of meanings, and two, explanation must be adequate at the level of statistical generalizations. And according to Weber, if I say explanation must be adequate at the level of meaning as well as explanation must be adequate at the level of statistical generalizations, then what is this adequacy? To what extent, or to after reaching a certain level, I will say that this is adequate. It may be adequate for me, it may not be adequate for others. Weber suggested adequacy is based on generalizations, and generalizations are based on experience. And then he was trying to build an empirical method, inductivist method, that there is a possibility, there is a probability that a particular action often occurs in a similar way or in the same way. If motives are the antecedent, then social action, if motives are the causes, then social action is the effect. Because no social action is undertaken without any motive, without any purpose, without any goal. Okay? If motives are the antecedent, then social action is the consequent. Weber, then what is a motive? Now, Weber defines motives as a complex, subjective meaning which seems to the actor herself or himself or to the observer as an adequate ground for the conduct in question. And multiple motives can lead to a similar or same kind of social action. Multiple motives, multiple causes, multiple contexts may lead to a similar or same kind of social action. There are different models of explanation. Suppose in the case of Durkheim, Durkheim followed monocausal model, that single cause single effect model, but Weber followed multiple causes single effect model. However, I mean multiple causes single effect model, that is why there may be many motives for a single kind, for similar social action, okay, which lead to similar social action or same social action. In 2021, if you look at this in the 21st century, we will say that no, there must be multiple motives, multiple causes, multiple effects model. Okay. The central dimensions of Weber nevertheless are that economic, religious and power relations are crucial sociological explanations. Weber pointed out three types of economic phenomena. How economic, religious and power relations are crucial or important sociological explanations. He was trying to refer to this, that one is economic phenomena, two is, secondly economically relevant phenomena, and thirdly economically conditioned phenomena. What is this? What are these economic phenomena, economically relevant phenomena and economically conditioned phenomena? Economic phenomena refer to institutions deliberately created and used for economic needs. Economically relevant phenomena refer to legal and religious phenomena which are not primarily economic, but have consequences which are economic in nature in certain circumstances. And when I said economically conditioned phenomena, I mean these are stratification systems and the state as the most important political institution are not directly economic phenomena, but they are affected in some way by economic phenomena. Now, let us see what are economic phenomena. Economic phenomena refer to institutions deliberately created and used for economic needs like market. Markets are purely economic phenomena. They have been created very intentionally, deliberately, purposefully, and they are used to meet our economic needs. When I say economically relevant phenomena, they may be legal phenomena, these may be religious phenomena, which are not primarily economic, but have consequences which are economic in nature in certain circumstances. Okay? Legal and religious phenomena. Economically conditioned phenomena refer to the stratification systems and the state that are not directly the economic phenomena, but they are affected in some way by maybe market. If market fails, then the state suggests that no, we must try to withhold certain expenditure. We cannot go on and on because the market has failed. That is why the state is affected if the market fails. That is why it is known as an economically conditioned phenomenon. Okay? Weber was of the view that as he said, economic, religious and economic, religious and power relations are crucial, are important sociological explanations. He said economy and religion, Weber was of the view that economy and religion cannot be separated in our day to day life. Okay? As Marx would argue that no, they are different things. Will see. But Weber was of the view that economic, religious and power relations are crucial sociological explanations. Economy and religion cannot be separated in our day to day life. Okay? Then what we have discussed today, very quickly we will try to wrap it up, that we have discussed the methodological implications in terms of selection, value ends, value interpretation, I mean interpretive understanding of social action, which is of two types. One is direct understanding and the other indirect understanding. Direct understanding of social action is alternatively known as observatory understanding of social action, and indirect understanding is alternatively known as explanatory understanding of social action. And how Weber defines culture as the totality of real objects to which we attach generally acknowledged values or complexes of meaning constituted by those values, and how culture consists of all those items produced by human beings for the sake of value ends. How Verstehen comprises two things, one imaginative identification and the second, a recognition of the rational connection between means and ends, and how indirect understanding of social action or explanatory understanding of social action, how it suggests at least two important things. One is explanation must be adequate at the level of meanings, and explanation must also be adequate at the level of statistical generalizations. And what is this adequate? I mean, to what extent we will say this is adequate? Adequacy is based on generalizations, and generalizations are based on experience. How Weber followed the model of multiple causes single effect model, how for Weber economic, religious and power relations are crucial sociological explanations, and how economic phenomena, economically relevant phenomena and economically conditioned phenomena in terms of the creation of market, usage of market, legal and religious phenomena, and stratification systems and the state respectively, how they are very important, and how economy and religion cannot be separated in our day to day life. Okay. We have discussed this, we have come to the closure of the fourth week. In the fifth week, okay, we are going to discuss Karl Marx in terms of 3 lectures. We are going to discuss, if you look at the course outline, we will discuss Marx's delineation of the relationship between idealism and materialism, materialist conception of history, principles of dialectic. Okay. I mean, how quantitative changes lead to qualitative changes and vice versa, the law of negation, unity and struggle of opposites or interpenetration of the opposites. We will discuss this, and how understanding nature in terms of the distinction between ideology and science, and what are the methodological implications. I mean, Marx, if you look at, Marx must be examined from 2 vantage points. One, as an ideologue of the Communist Party, and but more importantly, Marx must be examined as a top-notch theoretician. Okay. We are going to have 3 lectures in the 5th week, and we will discuss Marx. Thank you.